Yes.
switch audio. That's exactly right. Okay, cool. And we are on screen. This is awesome. Amazing. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to be here this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are, with the incredible Ziyang Wu, and we have a fabulous film screening to show you guys. I'm not going to talk too long. I'm going to dive right in. Um, but first, I just want to introduce Ziyang really quickly and the piece that you're about to see. So Ziyang Wu is a visual artist who lives and works in New York, where he currently teaches at the School of Visual Arts. He earned his MFA from the Rhode Island School of Design and his BFA from the Florence Academy of Fine Arts. Ziyang has shown his work internationally in China, North America, and Europe, including solo exhibitions at Nancy Margolis Gallery, CO2 Gallery, and at the Medici Palace and Milan Design Week. Um, He's received numerous fellowships and awards, including the McDowell Colony Fellowship and Institute for Electronic Arts Fellowship at Alfred University in 2019, Artists on the Verge Fellowship by Northern Lights and Jerome Foundation in 2017, and the AI CAD Teaching Fellowship by Association of Independent Colleges of Art and Design in 2016. He's also the winner of the ROCI Road to Peace exhibition by the Robert Rauschenberg Art Foundation and Artsy in 2015, and won the Best Creative Award in Milan Design Week in 2013. He is currently an experiment on art and technology track member at New Inc. In affiliation with the New Museum. Um, and so the film you're about to watch, A Woman with the Technology, examines how an individual's online experience becomes personalized by the internet algorithms and creates what activist Eli Pariser coined the filter bubble. I won't speak too much more than that because Yang's going to do a great job of explaining it in the video that you're about to watch. I would like to add really quickly that Silicon Valley is an unfunded project, and therefore we are accepting donations for Ziyang for his time today and for the screening. If you're able, please drop as much as you can. Even just a little bit helps, and I will be posting that donation link in the chats below just as soon as we get started. Um, Thanks for being here with us. Ziyang, is there anything you want to say before we get going with the screening?
Let's start.
Yeah, let's just dive right in. So hang on with 1 second. It's going to be a little clunky as I transition to the film, but it will get started in just a moment. So bear with us, please.
The project examines how the internet algorithm personalize an individual's online experience and create a filter bubble, a situation in which an internet user encounters only information and opinions that conform to and reinforce their own beliefs in the form of social practice, archive, AI generated simulation, and new media installations. The project started from a 3 month daily recording of my online presence. A series of keywords that are closely related to my daily focus are selected and used as initial input on various media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The keywords include censorship, surveillance, alienation, absurdity, neocolonialism, post-truth, trade war, Asian experience, 5G, artificial intelligence, mixed reality, K-pop, identity, among others, which basically represent the individual existence of myself. I log into these media every day and give likes, leave comments on the posts and videos I'm interested in. The daily researching experience are screen recorded and organized. If we look at the image here, On the left, on March 27, I searched these 14 keywords, and for example, the word neocolonialism, I end up watching this YouTube video that I was recommended. And then on the right part in this Word file are the captions from Facebook and Instagram, and also the subtitles or the auto-generated subtitles from the YouTube videos that I watched within one day, and I have like 90 days of these. The second part of the project is Archive, which presents how the internet algorithm affects the frequency changes of the keywords and their related data and images in the form of sketches, diagrams, and Excel forms. By inserting all the collected data, captions, and subtitles in a data analysis software, I created this Excel form. This is an example from day 1 to day 10. If we look at the top left corner, on day 1, for example, the word that appeared the most time is the word China, which appeared 70 times. The words that are highlighted yellow are the nouns, which conveys specific information and were used to create the diagrams later, whereas other verbs, adjectives, and adverbs are not highlighted. It was a quite labor-intensive process, but somehow it also feels very meditative. This is an example of day 2's diagram that were created after that. Basically, the bigger the bubble is, the higher frequency it has on that day. And these are examples of the archive from day 2 to day 5 and the diagrams. And once again, there are 90 of these. I also made several diagrams showing the top 50 keywords over the 90 days period, which are essentially my filter bubbles. The horizontal line is a date and the vertical line is a frequency. If we look at the close-up shot on the left, the keywords are technology, data, power, simulation, Chinese, Taiwan, future, and so on. I thought this diagram also looks like an abstract expressionism painting. Another diagram, which is basically the same idea on the top of the top 50 keywords. The inner circle is the keyword and the outer circle are the dates. This one I thought looks like a Damien Hirst spinning painting. Another diagram. This one is more related to the visuals of the actual filter bubbles. During the time when I was working on this project, I took a workshop by a friend of mine at Columbia University, which was to teach you how to make your first AI chatbot like your own Siri or Alexa. After the workshop, I was like, I do have a huge archive and could be used as training data to train an AI chatbot. By having a conversation with them, maybe I could create something very interesting. While at the same time, I realized I was missing one kind of data, which is what is going on in the images and the videos, in addition to the captions and subtitles. So I collaborated with artist and creative technologist Yang Wang, who created a dense caption image detection application that could detect the information in the images and videos. This image is an example. It detected the signs on the wall, the word Huawei, the word fox, a woman is smelling, and so on. As we were applying the image detection application on the videos, I also decided to make a 3-channel video to show the top 50 keywords in a video format and try to find these keywords, how these keywords are interconnected through a nonlinear narrative. Here's a 5-minute excerpt. The full video is 18 minutes and 25 seconds.
Post of Japan.
Japanese food. I've never had burritos in Japan before.
Seeing Japanese women posing as Latinas, Ayaka transforms her face to look like a Chicana. Power she saw in Chicanas from 90s movie.
Chicano identity, the Chicano movement.
Chicana culture, the Japanese communities.
Japanese people, the culture of Japan.
The original Japanese Chicanos.
Virtual romance, virtual character for lonely men, virtual companion, virtual wife, Japanese men, Japanese women, virtual boyfriends, virtual lovers, virtual reality. Japan, virtual companions,
Robots do every job going. Part of Japan, Robot Hotel.
Thank you, robot.
Japan, humanoid robots.
As robots continue to take over.
Robots.
Robot.
found the robots awkward.
Japan, black people, Japanese TV.
Face in Japan. Came to Japan, Japanese.
In Japan, they don't know how to do black hair. Japanese version of Sesame Street in Japan.
Japan, a black dude living in Japan.
Japanese people, oh, black guy. Whoa, black guy, you know?
Japanese slang, Japan, manji manji. Japanese manji. Manji. Manji.
Manji.
Manji.
Manji. Manji. Manji. Hashtag manji.
Manji no manji.
Nachisu no nachisu.
Nachisu wa.
Nachisu.
Manji.
Nachisu.
Nachisu wa.
Japan, gay Japanese, the mainstream Japanese, LGBT Japanese.
Gay no cup, gay no gay da, gay no cup, gay LGBT no
LGBT community.
LGBT Japanese people LGBT as Japanese LGBT LGBT community.
Taiwan is LGBT friendly. Taiwan's LGBT. Taiwan's president. Taiwan LGBT rights. Taiwan's
image.
LGBTQ in Taiwan.
LGBT rights.
Taiwan's
LGBT. Taiwan LGBT rights. Being gay men in China.
LGBT
Gay men. Gay social network. China. Chinese audience. China. LGBT Chinese government's trust among gay men.
In China, Chinese gay rights. China, the gays in China, 70 million gays. China, many gay men.
Thailand, ladyboys, transgender women, ladyboys in Thailand.
Ladyboy.
Ladyboys.
Ladyboy. The ladyboys.
Ladyboy.
Thailand to a ladyboy.
Sex and gender.
Transgender people. Trans woman is considered transphobic. Transgender rights.
Trans women, transgender females.
Transgender activists. Trans women. Trans men. Transgender kids. Trans activists. Transition. Social transition. Transphobic. Transition. Detransition. Social transition. Detransitioning.
Transgender ideology. Transgender
narrative.
Transgender, non-transgender.
Transgender athletes.
Transgender women.
Transgender trans person. Trans athletes.
Transphobic transgender.
Transphobic.
Transgender women.
Transgender.
Trans movement. Transracialism. Transracial, transabled, trans species, trans ageism. The trans movement. Trans-aged. Political correctness.
That's my problem with political correctness. Politically correct respect lacking for me in political correctness. So fake about political correctness. Democracy, grassroots democracy, democratic, liberal democratic democracy, local democracy, communitarian democracy, liberal democratic, no democracy there.
Democratic Party from the Democrats.
Democracy. Democratic democracy.
Democratic nomination. Andrew Yang.
Democrats care about people like me. Democratic Party used to be
Democratic primary for president, Mr. Andrew Yang.
Citizens in a democracy that I, Andrew Yang, can make this happen.
Andrew Yang, give him a hand.
2020 Democratic presidential hope. Andrew Yang.
9,000 Democrats. Democratic candidates. The Democrats. Andrew Yang.
Democrats. So many Democrats. Many Democratic votes. I'm Andrew Yang, Democrat in 2020.
Yang is all about, according to Yang's universal basic income. Andrew Yang knows Andrew Yang 2020.
I'm Andrew Yang.
Democratic as a Democrat, Asian Americans do not care about Asian Americans. Asian Americans, it's time for that Asian American voters. Asian Americans vote for Asian Americans.
You're Asian being Asian for Asian people.
Asian American. Talk about Asians. Asian male.
I don't talk about Asian because Asian success, Asian spectacular success, why Asians don't really play a role here against Asians.
Asian privilege. Asian privilege. Rich Asian men for the benefit of
Asians. Why Asians? It's Asian with the Asian privilege.
Asian Americans. Low income Asian Americans. Wealthy Asians. Asian Americans, Asian American group, Asian American group, Asian Americans, Republican Asian American kids, Asian Americans, Asian American.
So in this 3-channel video, I try to present how these keywords are interconnected. For example, in this 5 minutes excerpt, the keywords navigates or changes from Japan to LGBT, to transgender, to political correctness, to democracy, to Democrat candidates, to Andrew Yang, to Asian American, and so on. So the final part of this project, after I successfully trained its AI chatbot, I thought maybe through our conversations we could create a script that I can make a video based on the AI generated script. So I went on Google, typed how to write a successful film script, I click the first link, and it lists a series of questions that one should ask themselves to write a successful film script. So I ask my AI chatbot all these questions and put all the answers together as the final video script. So here, for example, if I read from the top, I ask, what is the title of your story? The answer was A Woman with a Technology. What is the name of your protagonist? In 2 words, socially creative VR gamer. What's your protagonist's daily routine? She was an Asian girl with a real living and can get a college. Or, for example, in a later question, what is the villain's name? Kokyo, describe your villain in 2 words. A new American AI, a virtual reality of the transgender power. And then the question goes on and on. I think one that is more absurd here or quite interesting, if you look at the second question here in this page, fun and games, what happens to the protagonist in the new world? The answer was she saw truck drivers create a humorous image as a communist prince going to see the president's $1 million network. She overcomes the research of shooting different people in the Japanese prison in Beijing and protect Chinese milling self-driving 3D printed cars, and so on. And here is the animated video based on the AI generated script.
Transracial, transable, trans species, trans ageism, the trans movement, trans.
Chinese gay, Chinese gay rights, China, the gays, China, 70 million gays, China, many gay men.
The project examines how the internet algorithm personalize an individual's online experience and create a filter bubble, a situation in which an internet user encounters only information and opinions that conform
Wow, that was incredible. Thanks everybody for who was here for the screening. Just gonna wait a couple minutes for Ziyang to come on back into our room so that we can keep chatting. If you guys have any questions that you'd like to address to the artist, please drop them in the Twitch chat or the Facebook chat. I'm monitoring both, and we'll make sure to talk about them. Just a minute, guys. Hang on. Just a minute, guys. Just a quick technical difficulty. My apologies.
It finally worked. Sorry.
There we go. No, it's okay. I mean,
Oh my goodness.
it's a little clunky as I switch from the video to the Zoom. I haven't quite gotten a hang on it yet. So apologies everybody who's watching, and thanks for bearing with us through that. Wow, that was amazing. I know I've seen it already, but every time I see it, I'm like, wow.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, I'm very sorry. I think there was some sort of like a navigation problem. I was like trying to log back in, but then it says like the host has another meeting going on. So yeah, I'm glad that we were. Sorry everyone.
No, it's probably my fault. So my bad. But it's okay. We're back together now, and it's all good. So while we were watching the film, we got a couple comments from the audience really wanting a little bit more information about how you were able to mine the data that was used in the film. For instance, all of those voiceovers that we heard kind of repeating these keywords over and over. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your process as you were beginning to make this film.
Yeah, so long story short, first of all, thanks everyone for attending and watching the screening. Really appreciate that. Long story short, I spent 3 months and collect every day, spent around 4 to 6 hours collecting, just like navigating online, just like what we do every day, but a bit more time than I normally do on social media or media. And so all the collected data includes like captions from a Facebook post or Instagram post, subtitles from a YouTube video I watched, and of course from that 3-channel video we use a technology called dense caption image detection technology to detect what's going on in the videos, as well as images. So all the data sort of are put together in the end, including captions, subtitles, image detection data over a period of 3 months of my sort of online presence on all different media platforms. And those were the data that was used to train that AI chatbot.
Amazing. And I guess, kind of to take it one step back from this, what was kind of your inspiration or your impetus to kind of embark on this project? What made you really want to start thinking about filter bubbles and ways that we could, examine them through data analysis?
Right. Thanks for the question. It was like I think there are many reasons and layers of reasons. I think first of all, I was always into the topic of surveillance and control and data and hacking and so on. And so from an everyday level, I was just sort of like inspired or by our daily interaction with media that you feel very strongly you're being watched and targeted through commercials and everything, but also just my own experience of navigating between different places. I come to the U.S. in 2014 as an international student, and what I realized is that after 4 years, I started making this work in 2018, and after 4 years, I realized I haven't talked to any sort of openly Republican person, for example. So I was like, oh, it is a way that how I guess we have been put in a certain sort of bubble. So I'm not saying like I wanted to talk to them, but the fact that I have never really even like seen them is interesting. And of course, like the famous case in 2016, the Cambridge Analytica, how they affect the U.S. election or Brexit is like famous cases, how the fact that they steal millions of data. So I think all of these reasons are drives and inspirations for me to explore and focus on this topic.
Absolutely, and I mean, it just feels so relevant, and that feeling of being stuck in a filter bubble is something that I'm sure that we can all relate to. I mean, I can definitely relate to that, and that's actually one of the reasons why I created Silicon Valley in the first place, is because I was seeing some of these bubbles, and I was, is there a way that we can kind of, through our social media practice, pop them or transcend through them and get into other digital spheres? And I'm wondering, this project really emerged from a really personal place of examining your own social media practice. And so I'm wondering, what did you learn about yourself as you were, embarking on this? Like, was it kind of surprising to you once you started to really kind of dig through the results of your study?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to answer using maybe two examples. First, there are many like very interesting examples through the collecting phase. For example, I was sort of like suggest to watch a lot of like, for example, Fox News, which I never did before. And I was like, but the topics are, for example, there are topics related to 5G, which is related to trade war. So I was like, oh, that's super interesting. So I wanted to watch them. So I think the first example I want to share is that I think from day 2, I start, as you guys have seen from the 3-channel video, I start to be sort of suggest by videos of Andrew Yang, the presidential candidate. And I was like, who is that at first? I had no idea. And then by watching some of his videos, I was like, oh, I might be his target audience, even though I'm not a U.S. citizen and I won't vote for him. But it is interesting, like that's how the money that got paid on YouTube, that's how it works to target people, and it only take 2 days for them. So I think that's one thing that is for me is interesting. And on the personal level, another example is that I feel we're all social constructs, right? So we are all sort of like being constructed in a certain way. I feel that the clip that I chose in that 3-channel videos, how a lot of part about identity politics, which were, for example, in the beginning, a very foreign topic to me, like before I moved to the U.S., right? So I think the interesting part is that part almost shows how like a Chinese, which is my national identity, how the sort of like cultural identity part or social identity part were sort of like influencing me or like dragging me into a different and reconstructing me in a certain way. So I think those are the parts that were very inspiring, which is something I always think about or curious about, is like the in-between space, in between cultures, in between societies, in between politics, and what is that coming out of it, like as someone like me who are sort of always in this sort of in-between mode and situation. So for me, there are like 2 layers in the work. First is filter bubble or AI technology, but the embedded layer, the hidden layer, is sort of like this hybrid in-between state. I was trying to use this work to sort of explore and present as well.
That's really interesting. I mean, I actually recently have been doing, in talking about in-betweenness, I've been actually doing a lot of research into liminality for a talk that I'm doing next week. And I've been reading a lot of, just this idea of this anthropologist named Victor Turner, who was really writing about rituals and rites of passage, and how you are one way before the ritual and one way afterwards, but during you're in this really in-between liminal period. And I'm wondering if that maybe is something that that maybe relates to this project in terms of like you began in this project in one way, you kind of went through the whole process, and then probably emerged with a different understanding of yourself, but also your place within a much more broader ecosystem. And I'm wondering if that's, and I know that for a lot of people who do a lot of like filter research and algorithmic research in terms of where they're being placed in all of these network flows, is a lot of folks find out that the way that they've been categorized is really similar to a lot of people. And even though we feel really unique, we're, our data profiles oftentimes, mirror other people's. And so I'm wondering if that was something that you felt at all after, going through this, if whether it made you feel connected to other people in the sense that you were being kind of put in the same category as them, or, if you felt like different or kind of transformed after going through this process.
I think once again, maybe to go back to that 3-channel video, that the part that I was sharing, I do feel that's a part that shows very well how, because I think those topics, those keywords are very much what we focus on, like in a I don't know, in an American context or in a Western context, whereas like my friends, my families, these are not the topics they're familiar with or interact with and so on. So this literally shows or proves that that's how, for example, YouTube and Instagram that are reconstructing, or my knowledge to constructing me to become, say, like a Chinese American, even though I'm not. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, that's something that I feel like that's sort of like very locally, culturally sort of constructed. So we all think in a certain way within a certain region, for sure. I think we all understand. But I do feel like that's my internal sort of fight, not fight, like the reaction to the collecting experience. It was like, oh, they're trying to construct in me in this way, if that makes sense. Yeah. So.
I mean, that's really interesting, and I mean, you hear a lot of times people have conversations about the violence of the algorithm and kind of the violent force of kind of squeezing you into a category that you've never identified with or isn't really a part of your life outside of what's going on online. And in that sense, it's, I see a lot of, I think you've pointed out something that's really problematic and really dangerous. You've provided evidence of something, more so than creating a beautiful artwork that is a real treat to watch. You've really showcased something about, the violent capacity of algorithms to alter an individual's identity. And that's really interesting. I mean, I think that as well, just given your position as a Chinese artist living in America, how that Western frame of the algorithm was kind of embedded, into your data profile.
Right.
And I'm wondering, is there a way to combat this, or to circumnavigate this, or to subvert it in some way? Are we just kind of subject to the rule of the algorithm and this kind of really Western way of thinking that our systems have imposed, or is there another way? Is there something that we can do to break free of this?
I feel there's more structural way to combat with it, for sure. I remember after this project, I move on and do some more specific research on algorithm of. I read the book Algorithm of Oppression, and on the book cover, like it was. I think on the cover it was. Yeah, exactly.
I got it right here.
Oh my goodness! So that's a good example, because that cover image was taken in 2011, I think, and this is amazing.
Show it off for the audience.
And whereas if we do the same search right now, for example, why Black women, right? If we do the same search right now on Google, nothing will show up. Nothing will show up, for example. And also, I was during my research, I was typing in. Because there were also cases that I remember in 2013, there were cases there they were typing, Black girl, and there were pornographic images. But right now, you wouldn't necessarily see it, because these are all the efforts that are done by activists, by artists, by, I don't know, all kinds of people that layers and just like keep pushing, and then to structurally change how the engineers sort of do the build the algorithm. Or so whereas if we type in Latina girl or Asian girls right now, it's still very much pornographic sort of information, related information, and or fetishization. Whereas, for example, if you type in black girls, it's different. That I feel like that's one way to go, which is sort of like just fight and change the structure. And our which worked, I think, is pretty positive. And on the other hand, on daily experiences, I do feel I'm kind of cautious. So just sort of like, block your camera. don't always say agree to that terms and conditions and things like that. Just on all kinds of levels. That's how I react to it. But I do feel like, instead of like totally getting away from it, to combat it is definitely a nicer, sort of greater.
Absolutely, and I mean, obviously, there's a lot that we can do as users to, change the way we're using hashtags and keywords and search terms to kind of use search engine optimization kind of against itself. But at the same time, I mean, I'm also a really big advocate that, tech companies need to make change. They need to see that this is happening and, kind of realize, oh gosh, I just dropped something, but they need to kind of realize, what they're doing and from the ground up, from the building of these platforms, from the base to the top, this kind of, I think, thinking about ethics and equality and, misuse of these technologies needs to be kind of an institutional thing from the ground up.
Absolutely.
Because there's only, I feel on the one hand, I mean, not to sound hopeless, but there's only so much that we can do.
Absolutely. I think it's more like the system or institutional because, last year I was working with a lab, for example, to try out their facial recognition that they built, and it was like recognize me as somebody else in the company, and basically it was because the lack of Asian faces in their data set. It's just that simple. Like yes, I think all these problems are actually like simpler than we thought. It's just like if you have enough data, it will be a nicer algorithm. So I do feel. It could be, I guess theoretically it could be simple, but I guess when we actually do it, it just like takes forever.
Yeah, I mean,
obstacles.
It's slow, but it's really crucial work, and I mean that I think that at the same time as we're fighting for physical, tangible justice, racial justice in this country, I think that part of that, I think that while obviously human body concerns should take precedence, I do think there's so much racist technology that is embedded within all of our systems. And as we're fighting that fight, we also need to make this fight online and really think about media justice, for everyone, because I think that this, particularly Black folks, but really everyone, because it's such a pervasive issue. And if our systems are changing, then I think that eventually, there's a really big slippage. There's a lot of blur between the online and the offline. And I think that as we change our digital worlds, we can also impact our physical ones as well, and vice versa. And I think that, it's something that's really important for activists to keep in mind as they're, talking to legislators and talking to tech companies to advocate for these things. And so I want to talk a little bit about the script in your film, the narrative that's kind of going through the single channel version. I wanted to ask you about this story that's happening, and sort of where this almost like, it's almost like a mythological battle, almost like a sci-fi epic that's happening, where this came from and sort of what story you were trying to tell.
Yes. So the way the information that were produced by the chatbot is the most sort of like straightforward, basic chatbot style. Like I trained with whatever data, and it is actually not a logical reaction, because eventually the data was still sort of like too little. Like I spent 3 months every day collecting a lot, shit tons of data, but in order to train a logical chatbot, it's still like too little. So it becomes so illogical, and what it produced, like if I ask the same question to them again, they might produce something else. So what I did was literally it wasn't like like one answer. What I did literally was like whatever I asked, the answer the first time I just pick it as and then put them together as the script. And I think what it matters is what are the words within the answers in the answers of these questions, which represented the keywords that I was able to collect within that sort of like a certain amount of time. So even though all the answers are kind of different, but in the end, by sort of like putting all the answers together, they still represent the whole worldview of sort of like this AI thought, which represent what I have watched within those 3 months, which is kind of like a self-portrait in a certain way, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's crazy, and it's so interesting to think about it like that. We've got a question from the audience. What do you really want your viewer to take away from this work? You know, what after, you know, I mean, obviously there's a lot to say about filter bubbles and technology, but for you, what is the real key, you know, thing that we should internalize after, you know, engaging with this kind of robust study of the filter?
Yes. First of all, it's definitely bring awareness. Definitely, but also I think there's enough sort of enough awareness on our daily lives. But I do want to sort of like dig deeper and use the narrative that we created, of me and the chatbot, we created to sort of like visually represent what my bubbles are, but also is very universal in a way because the initial input I put, the keywords are very much what everyone focus on, such as data, surveillance, identity. I also put 5G, which is a bit more specific, but the output sort of out of it was very, I think, in a way, universal enough that I hope everyone can connect to. And a deeper layer, another layer, which is a bit less sort of clear, kind of hidden, was that I hope the audience to maybe take away is to share my investigation in this sort of in-between space once again. And these are very fragile or transient sort of moments that I feel by talking through the words of a chatbot, which we often see as a relatively more objective entity, is maybe would be more helpful to sort of like juxtapose all these unrelated information, like the absurdity would, to rationalize this absurdity a little bit. So these are the two things I was trying to achieve. Of course, the first layer is way more important. The second layer is, I think, is something that is more, it's not just specific to this project, but to all my other projects.
Wow, yeah, and I think that that's really important work to do, and I think we're involves so much subtlety and nuance. But it's also something that, you know, I think that, you know, a lot of people, you know, think of digital art as being kind of different than other arts in terms of it being a materiality that can be intangible and hard to connect to. But I think that one of the reasons I really love your work is because it is so deeply important to each and every one of us. It relates to all of us, even if you don't have a profile on Facebook. I'm sure there's, based on your shopping habits or whatever, there is data profiles of you out there. And thinking about this is so crucial and so important for anyone and everyone. And I also really like this work because it exists in so many different ways. I mean, you have this whole data archive in this study. You have an AI entity of a technological being. You have a 3D rendered film and a 3-channel film, and it kind of all exists in this ecosystem. I think it's a really amazing example of what one might call the expanded internet artwork, which is a term I coined by a colleague of mine, Cece Moss, and who inspires me a lot. And I talk about it all the time, and I think that your work is such a brilliant example, of this kind of multi-sided work that exists in so many different ways and so many different forms. And I'm wondering, as this work kind of moves through different pathways and different nodes of the network, the film then is then re-entered into that system and then becomes a part of these filter bubbles all over again. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, how you navigate that, like how you not only deal with your own online presence, but the presence of the artwork as it kind of expands across so many different spaces, both physical. I know that you have a gallery show right now, and digital.
Yes. This is actually like also very much related to the current time where before all the spaces opens, we're all doing online shows, and I think this is super important and interesting, which is to have information either go back to the internet or just like flow on the internet, and I do feel like this, like we as media artists, that's what we're best at, and we like all the shows like so I think that the fact that it goes back to the internet is a part of the work for sure, to have the information like keep flowing and sort of like going back and forth. And also I always feel like the same piece, the fact that it's so sort of like open in terms of like the interpretation. I do feel like there's a huge difference. For example, when I show this piece back home, like in China, for example, in Beijing, what people end up focusing on more, for example, is the AI part of the work, or robotics and so on. Whereas when I'm showing here in the States, or what people focus on more are the identity politics, that part, that clip, especially the 3-channel part. So, which totally, once again, I think shows people's sort of like focus within a certain cultural space. Like what are the more, not trendy topic, but the topic that people are more engaging with, right? So I think the fact that it goes back to the internet, I do think is very, very important in terms of sort of like the reaction again. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm answering.
No, you are. I mean, and I think that I think that you're thinking so much along the lines of an expanded internet artist in terms of the work not only being the work and where it goes, but also the reaction to it. I think that how people engage with it, comments and questions and tweets and all of these things kind of come together and then kind of become a part of the aura of the piece as well. And so I think that that's really fascinating to hear, that difference between East and West. I mean, because obviously I'm asking you questions about identity politics and how you feel about, your thing, rather than like, focusing on the AI portion of the work. And so I'm, that makes me think like how much of me is me and how much is a product of my environment and how much is a product not only of my like physical environment, but especially my digital environment and all of the kind of ways that algorithms kind of slip subtle and invisible propaganda kind of across my screen.
Yes, I think exactly. Thanks for helping me conclude that. This is what I wanted to express just now. But
it's kind of
thank
crazy
you.
And it's a bit spooky, to think about that. And I think that it's also so clever that the piece came out of a study, but then also is kind of a study in its own case in terms of it kind of is producing more results as it kind of moves and goes through.
That's what I hope to achieve. That's why I think the steps seems like it's a little bit too much. It's the first time I actually had so many steps in my work. Normally, I like the directness in many cases, but this is the first time because when I started working on the step 3 of the project, I was like, I think it become its own case. So maybe I would move one step further. Maybe as a whole project, I think it's I was like having a hard time to handle like the complexity versus the literacy or efficiency in terms of communication when there's too many layers, and would also feels like too heavy as a project. But it was a sort of experiment. Yeah.
So I think we're nearly at the end of our conversation. It's almost 6 o'clock in the East Coast and 3 p.m. here in California. But I want to end, kind of on a positive note. And, after all of your research, you're totally an expert on this topic, and there's a lot to be worried about for sure, and there's a lot to, really watch out for. But I'm wondering, what makes you feel hopeful about this domain, and what really gives you motivation for the future?
Yes. I think on two hands. First is what I just shared in terms of what have already got changed on different media by just like all different kinds of people pushing it. Like the fact that we all realize them, and how we taking actions, and the fact that our search results are more equal, are more justified, like in a good way. So I think that's already and artists and creators are continuously developing new tool to counter attack with that, right? So I do think those are very positive. And on the other part, which is a little bit more specific to the COVID case, I won't necessarily say as positive, but an observation, which is like, I think we talk a lot about how, for example, countries like Korea was dealt with COVID super successfully because they have a very great sort of monitoring system, like their data, their phone, everything's connected, right? So we know what everything's going on, which seems like terrifying, I guess, in a way that they have all your data once again. But I think there are actually parts that for example, from a few articles I read, the reason why, for example, Korea did such a great job is not just because of sort of like digital surveillance and digital manipulation or control, but more because everyday lives, from the governmental perspective to people's perspective, how there are so many sort of like volunteers, workers, and so on that are like still is the human interaction that are actually break down a lot of these sort of like digital control and actually like those are actually the factors that help countries like Korea, who did such a great job on sort of the COVID cases. It's not just the digital sources, because I think we had a big concern of the sort of like totalitarian capitalism new society construct by these massive surveillance, or even more surveillance because of COVID. But I do feel like it's essentially we are creating more. We have the subjectivity. We're creating way more interesting things to combat these sort of massive sort of surveillance and control, or data algorithms, or biases. Yeah. So.
That's awesome, and that's true. I mean, through sharing this work and through making this work, I think that we can definitely, there are small ways to make differences, and in our daily lives, make changes to our practice to kind of fight against some of those things. So, thank you so much, Ziyang, for being here, and thank you for sharing your work with us, and thank you to the audience for being here. I'm going to drop the donation link one more time, so please support Ziyang, and please support Silicon Valley's program. That would be really, really amazing.
Thank you.
Until next time, it was really great to chat with you. And for anybody who's watching this live, I'm going to be posting the recap online later, so you can go back and go through the film again and take another listen to what the incredible and very clever things that Ziyang has to say.
Thank you. I want to add another thing.
Yeah, of course.
I just finished a new video piece that I'm
that's right.
Posting or premiering on IGTV. Once again, thinking about like format of online exhibition, and thinking about like to have the work to be able to flow on the internet. So that's why, I post them on TikTok and IGTV every other day. And tomorrow I'm gonna post the part 3. So and also in the next week. So please feel free to check them out. It's also the first time I sort of like premiere or work on fully online. So
That's
it was
so cool.
very exciting.
Well, I'll definitely share it on the Valet so that folks can, see, so that folks can see it. Because I watched the first episode the other day, and it's really fucking cool. So I highly recommend it to everybody who's watching. Please definitely go and check it out.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you again for being here, and thanks everybody for watching. Till next time.
Next time. Thank you so much.